This is our first lesson in microeconomics, and we are going to be looking at demand and bringing a little bit of supply into this presentation as well, but our main focus is on the demand curve. Demand, it's important that you take into account that you are both willing and able to purchase a product at a particular time and place. So this is a definition that you need to know very well, and we will look at the importance of willing and able and time and place shortly. So I'm going to ask the class who would like to buy a Lamborghini Aventador, and hopefully some hands will go up, and it's a very nice car. But if I were to say who at this right now is able to buy a Lamborghini Aventador, the hands don't go up. I've had in past years one hand go up, which is fine, then that student would have been part of the demand curve, but generally not too many hands go up when I say who is able at this point. I think it's a very expensive car. So what is the difference between willing and able? Probably pretty self-explanatory. Willing you'd like, but able you have to actually be able to afford. The relevance of time and place. Well, at some future date, you might be a nuclear physicist, a famous doctor, surgeon, lawyer, and so on, and you may well be able and willing to buy a Lamborghini. But at this particular time and this particular place, you may be willing to buy a Lamborghini, but you do not have a demand for a Lamborghini because you are not able. So we're going to look at a fictitious assortment of candy bars. And hopefully one of these or some of these are your favorite candy, or if not, replace it with something that is. And I'd like to ask you how many units you'd be willing and able to buy in 1 week at each of the various prices in the table below. So typically an answer might go, well, at $5, maybe 0. At $4, maybe 2. At 3, maybe 5. And so on. Okay, so we look at your particular demand for candies at the particular prices. Now what I will do is ask the entire class to fill in, not the entire class, excuse me, I'll ask 4 students to volunteer their answers. And for the sake of, well, let's see, let's just do this quickly. Okay, so if we had the individual demands, we see as the prices go down, that the quantity demanded goes up. And if we look at the market demand, if we had a very small economy for just 4 people, we would add the individual amount. So 1 plus 2 plus 1 is going to be 4, 3, 5, 8, 12, 10, 19, 12, 18, 25, 10, 18, 18, 20, 30, 40, 15, and 12, 27, 37, 39, 49, 53, hopefully I'm not making any mistakes, 20, 40, 50, 60, 70. Okay, so we can see again, as price goes down, the quantity demanded goes up. If we were to graph this, it may well look something like this. Demand, which we're also just going to call D. Now note that on this graph, quantity demanded is on the x-axis and price is on the y-axis. So this is an example of the demand schedule, the table, listing at various prices the number of items demanded, so you would be willing and able. And the demand curve is the graphic representation of demand. This is very important to take into consideration, the law of demand. As price falls, the quantity demanded increases. And it's very important that you use the term quantity demanded increases and not just demand, because we'll see that if we say the demand increases, we're talking about something completely different. And as price rises, the quantity demanded decreases. So there it is, sloping downwards to the right. And as the price goes up, the quantity demanded is going down. Or as price goes down, the quantity demanded is going up. So as I said, it slopes downwards and to the right. So demand, again, a very important definition. The quantity demanded of a good is the amount consumers plan to buy in a given period of time at a particular price. So we know that wants are the unlimited desires or wishes people have for products, but the quantity demanded shows the amount that people are actually willing to buy. The law of demand states, other things remaining the same, the higher the price of a good, the smaller is the quantity demanded. And another expression for all other things remaining the same is ceteris paribus. This assumes that when there are a number of different factors that determine something, only one is changing and all of the others are held constant. So think of a scientific experiment where you are only allowing one variable to change and you're assuming that all other variables remain the same. So looking at how to read a demand curve. So if we look at the quantity demanded at the various prices, at 40, we are demanding 100 widgets. At 30, 150, and at 15, 200. So we can see as price goes down, quantity demanded increases. So the law of demand is the result of two effects. One, the substitution effects. So if the relative price of a product rises, so the price of one thing rises and other things aren't, or the other things are actually falling in price. So if the relative price of a product rises, people buy less of it because the opportunity cost of consuming it has increased. So in other words, if you're going to consume that same good with a relatively higher price, you are giving up even more of other things because its price has risen relatively higher than other goods. The income effect. If the higher price for a product, it effectively lowers people's incomes because your income now will buy you less. And as a result, reduces their purchases of most goods because they aren't able to as readily. The demand for a product, so we're looking at the overall demand. It's not one relationship between a price and a quantity demanded. Rather, it's the entire relationship between all possible prices and the quantities that people demand at every possible price. So in other words, it's that whole curve. The quantity demanded, however, is the amount that people will buy at a particular price. So it'll be that relationship between a price and a specific quantity demanded, whereas demand is the entire curve and the entire relationship. The demand curve also shows people's willingness and ability to pay. That is, for any given quantity, it shows the highest price people are willing to pay for the last unit purchased. Because the amount that people are willing to pay measures their benefit from the good, the demand curve is also called the marginal benefit curve. And remember, marginal is for one more unit. So if we look at the upper left-hand side, as we get to the price being even higher, we see like what is that price that someone is willing to pay at the margin for at that high price for one more unit. If we look at it at the other extreme, at the bottom, first was the bottom, the upper left, not right. And now if we look at the bottom right, again, as the price drops, we'll see what is someone willing to pay for one more unit when they already have quite a bit. And why does the marginal benefit decrease as you consume more? Well, we looked at that with the example of the desert with having more and more glasses of water, and that you would value the glasses of water less as you had more. And we also looked at it with a professor feeding a poor university student marshmallow after marshmallow. So what happens to quantity demanded when price changes? So if price goes up, we know that quantity demanded is going to go down. There's an inverse relationship. And if price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. And we saw that with the chocolate bars or the candy bars. So when the price of the good in question changes, you are moving, in essence, along the curve. So we're going to look at a contraction versus extension along the curve. So let's look at what happens to quantity and determine whether it's a contraction or extension. So hopefully it'll be pretty intuitive with what's happening in this situation. So definitely focus on what's happening to quantity and then figure out if it's a contraction or extension. Don't memorize, oh, if it's moving from left to right or right to left, because you'll have a different scenario when you look at demand and you look at supply, and it's really not a good idea to memorize if you don't have to. So if we have price going up, so we have P1, we're going to go up to P2. At P1, we have this particular quantity being demanded. At P2, we have this particular quantity being demanded. We've moved along the curve, and we want to try and figure out if it's a contraction or extension along the curve. Well, let's look at what happened to quantity. We went from Q1 to Q2, so we're demanding less, or a smaller quantity demanded. Would you associate the word less with a contraction or extension? It's a contraction. So it's a contraction along the demand curve. Let's look at what happens when the price goes down. So here's our P1. Here's the P2. This would relate to Q1 with the P1. This is Q2. We've moved from one point to another along the curve because price has changed. We've gone from Q1 to Q2, so the quantity demanded has increased, and we'd expect an increase to be associated with an extension. So this is an extension along the demand curve.